Okay, let's hope everyone's on there. So we kick off. So thanks everyone for joining today. Today we're covering defending the perimeter. My name is Chris Watkins. I'm the head of security at Ultima, and I'm joined today by two guys from Redscan, Constantine and George, and I'll let them introduce themselves shortly. So first, just a little bit of housekeeping. So in terms of the way the webinar will run, everyone will remain on mute for the duration of the session. Please, if you do have any questions as you go through, please feel free to ask. You should see a Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen where the GoToWebinar section is launched. So we're happy to take questions and we want to answer them at appropriate times. So before we kick into the presentation, we've just got a quick poll for you to do. So I'm just going to launch this poll. So it's a question around the use of technologies such as EDR and Next-Gen AV on your work machines. So if you could go ahead and answer that would be great. And then we're going to come back and sort of discuss the sort of results of that and what this means later on in the presentation. So I'll just give everyone a minute to make sure they can respond. I can see a few people have already responded. So we've got 2 more people left to answer, and then we're all there. Okay, that was good. Great. Just close that part out. Okay. Apologies, sharing the wrong screen there. 1 second. There we go, perfect. Okay, so today we're obviously discussing security as a whole. So just to sort of explain where this fits in Ultima's kind of portfolio. So we're showing up a slide that kind of shows our 4 key innovation areas right now. So any of you that are existing long-term Ultima customers will be well aware of these in terms of our messaging and things that we're talking about with you guys. So across the top, we've got processes. This is around automation of sort of tasks and applications, things like that, using a mixture of things like RPA and our own in-house applications such as reconnect. We've then got edge and cloud, which are our workspace and sort of cloud data center offerings across the middle. And then down the bottom is a fairly new one to us, autonomous network, looking at networks in a slightly different way to how we've had before. But in the middle, bringing this all together is security. So today's topic is focusing on the right hand of those bubbles, so SOC, MDR, and EDR. And so we're delighted today to be joined by Redscan. So Redscan are our sort of go-to partner for security and sort of assistance in these kind of services. So we've been doing some great work with them over the past few months and years. And we've got Constantine and George who are going to go through exactly how some of the solutions that we can use today can assist with the defense of your environment. So I'm going to hand over to George now to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Chris.
Yours, George.
Just trying to share my screen, 2 seconds. I hope everyone can see that.
Yep, you're good.
Brilliant. So my name is George Glass. I'm the head of threat intelligence for Redscan, and with me also is Constantine Curtis, our director of sales.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you for your time today. I'm Constantine Curtis. I'm the sales director of Redscan. George, shall I start and introduce you properly?
Yeah, sure.
Good. So thank you everybody for joining today, our webinar called Defending Beyond the Perimeter. Redscan is a strong partner of Ultima's. We've been working with Ultima for quite a long period of time. And over the past few months, we've identified a specific area of focus for many of our clients and a specific set of challenges for many of our clients in the very dynamically changing environment that we're all working in. So what certainly happened over the past 4 months with COVID-19, the outbreak, and now the imminent kind of return to work is that our ways of working have changed. And as a result, with everything changing around, what we have identified is that customer requirements and challenges have changed because the landscape by which they leverage in order to deliver services has changed. So what we have certainly been working with our clients on is a set of solutions that enables them to securely deliver their products and their services while working remotely, and making sure that it is as secure as it can possibly be while their borders and their networks evolve and change. So the reason we wanted to present today with Ultima is because we do recognize that the defending the perimeter in the traditional way of the network perimeter is no longer fit for purpose, and certainly working from home it introduces a significant amount of risk that we need to be considerate of and be able to protect against. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my esteemed colleague George Glass. George Glass is our head of threat intelligence. He has a very strong background in working across a number of verticals in different industries, starting out in defense, finance, and e-commerce. And George started life out as a security analyst in a SOC, in a security operations center, doing the shifts, doing the legwork, the hard work, and then eventually moved on to building automation within security operations centers to make sure that the life of a SOC analyst is as effective and fast as possible. So what you find in traditional security operations centers is that a lot of the tasks that the teams need to carry out are very menial and repetitive. And certainly building automation in there is critical in making the SOC analyst's life easier and more effective. And then George moved very much on the threat intelligence side. So how can a SOC interact and leverage knowledge of what is happening out there in the wild to improve detections and improve responses? And certainly in our business within Redscan, he has been spearheading our threat intelligence efforts in that sense. So good morning, George, and thank you for joining and leading today's presentation.
Good morning.
Great. So just a quick run through of the agenda for today. We will start off by talking a bit about the challenges of endpoint security. So really teasing out why endpoint security is important, and particularly why it is very important today. Today, the world's changed, as I mentioned earlier. Today, people are working from home. Today, the risks of working from home are very different to the risks of working from home 6 or 12 months ago. There's an innate fear within that we are certainly seeing across most individuals around the world, and certainly the risk is changing again because people are now moving back to the office. So what risks, what things are you now what things might you be moving back into your main corporate environment? And then we'll move on to how endpoint detection and response technologies can support organizations in decreasing that risk. And why should organizations be considering it, give you a bit of an understanding of the landscape of endpoint detection response and antivirus in general. And I think then one of the key components of this presentation and this webinar is for George to talk you through how best to leverage your EDR tool sets to get the maximum benefit out of them. Finally, I'll spend a bit of time talking to you about how Ultima's and Redscan's capabilities can support you in that journey if you feel that you want Ultima and Redscan to deliver that service on your behalf rather than you doing it in-house. We'll take questions and answers at the end of the presentation, of course, so any questions, please feed them and we'll answer them at the end. I think Chris will take those and we will respond to them. And I think in the middle of the agenda, we'll also reveal the results of the poll. Again, thank you for your time, and I'll hand over to George.
Thank you very much. So to begin today, I'd like to understand what the most prevalent and maybe highest risk threats there are to our home working users. And you may recognize some of these names of particular types of malware, emotet, trickbot. These are all delivered by malspam, and email-based threats are still very widely used by threat actors. It's a commercialized operation where they can buy these pieces of malware and the infrastructure behind them. And so it's extremely prevalent. The numbers that we're seeing for these types of malware have certainly increased in the last few months, and indeed actually there's been a small spike in the last couple of weeks. The delivery method for these malware types usually malspam, and of course recently the threat actors have changed their tactics to move towards more newsworthy events. As you can see on the right here, there's a very convincing World Health Organization spam. This delivers trickbot, which can infect and move laterally within an environment in an automated fashion. A lot of these lures and targets are highly emotional at the moment. This only increases click-through rate for users. For small and medium-sized businesses, they may be financially targeted, so hit an invoice or insurance, and indeed they will even impersonate the government to achieve high click-through rates, and we know these work. These types of malware threats that are being delivered are used to have remote access to a machine and autonomously spread through an environment. What we're seeing more recently is that attackers are more than willing to dwell within a network for a very long time. And indeed, there's a second market for these infections. So a cybercriminal gang may infect a number of machines. They will identify what sort of network they're on, and then they'll sell access to that network accordingly. So that's how the first cybercriminal gang make their money, and the second one may come along and perform a ransomware attack, for example. This kind of activity certainly increases the risk when remote workers return to the office, because a remote user may come back to the office with a completely dormant infection on their machine with absolutely no knowledge, and then an attacker will simply use that infection to spread laterally throughout a corporate network instead of just a home network.
Sorry, George. Before we move on, I just had a quick question for you. Are these new? Are these new threats? Are we expecting these threats to have only come out because of COVID-19, or have they been around for a while?
No, these sorts of threats are certainly not new. Some of these types of malware are modular in nature. So TrickBot, for example, has recently developed a Wi-Fi module to steal Wi-Fi network credentials for spreading. But I think that the novel thing that we're seeing recently is that the attackers are more than willing to dwell on a network for a longer period of time. Right. They have identified that can get them a lot more money in the long run, rather than just immediately ransomwaring one machine.
Yeah, I guess so. What they're doing is they're using all methods, but using much more advanced and persistent techniques or tactics to get in and exfiltrate much more than just a ransomware PC, get a couple of $100 and move on.
Absolutely, yeah, precisely. Their main goal is to get domain admin and ransomware an entire corporate network, because it's far more lucrative. Absolutely right.
Have you seen any of these things in the SOC? Have we seen any of these things in our SOC yet?
Yes, we have. Yes. Our EDR products can detect them, and it has indeed stopped them, but we have seen these sorts of threats delivered to endpoints. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Sorry, mate, keep going.
So let's look at why home networks are insecure. remote workers have a number of security vulnerabilities that a corporate environment may not have, purely because they don't secure a home environment as you would a corporate network. One of the more newsworthy ones, I guess, would be Internet of Things. These are notoriously vulnerable. Many people will run their Internet of Things devices with many vulnerabilities and exploits on the same flat network as the rest of their computing equipment, for example. And these can produce an increased risk for home users. Mostly, home users may not have such a stringent patching cycle as your corporate devices. They may chop and change between using a corporate device and a home use device, and that can increase risk. There's a general lack of cyber awareness by other family members that may be living in the home. As I said before, there's more than likely a flat network. This can lead to threat actors and malware abusing work groups, for example. They will probably not have the same level of proxy blocking or firewall capabilities if they're not on a VPN into your corporate environment. So maybe one of these links, one of these email messages could be sent to a user in a corporate environment, and when they click on it, it's blocked by the firewall, the proxy, for example. The likelihood of that happening at home is very small. They're going to have very limited access to your help desk or your tech ops teams. Most of the remediation that they need to have access to will more likely be remote. That certainly increases the difficulty of the task. And another more interesting one that, again, we've seen in our SOC is the use of USB media to transfer files to and from machines and to print. USB media can be readily infected by a number of the malware threats that I showed you on the previous slide. As soon as a installed piece of malware understands that a USB device has been connected, it will implant itself onto that piece of USB media. Because they're so prevalent and they can hop air gaps, hop networks very easily, it's a prime vector for them to use, and they will actually use it. So now we need to understand antivirus, how antivirus works, and the sort of the evolution of antivirus into next-gen AV and EDR. In the 1980s, the AV generation started with Kaspersky starting up, and in the following 20 or so years, the antivirus industry is certainly getting more established. At this point in time, most, if not all, of the antivirus vendors are basing their detection technology on signatures, using hashes to understand what a bad file looks like. If a piece of antivirus software sees that bad hash, it will stop it from running and remove it from your machine. That's how they operated. In the late 90s, early 2000s, we see the first emergence of macro-based viruses. I don't know if anyone here remembers the I love you worm. Again, it spread via email, copying itself to all of your email contacts, and one of the most prolific worms of the time.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, quite vividly, actually. Yeah.
Definitely remember that one. Yeah.
In response to that, we see the antivirus industry moving towards sandboxing some heuristics and even very basic machine learning. This is to try and stop some of the more novel threats, things being delivered by email, that kind of thing, because previously they were just focusing on primarily executable files. In response to this, the cyber criminals, they use polymorphic and fileless malware threats. So polymorphic means that the code base changes, thus the hash changes for the file, and fileless malware threats install directly to memory, and they run from memory. So those sorts of threats are almost undetectable by signature-based detection methods. And so the antivirus and the EDR industry, they start to focus on event collection from machines to understand what normal looks like, and what malicious looks like in terms of what events are happening on the machine. In the late teens, one tool now is usually the go-to for defending a machine. It can prevent a lot of the cyber kill chain from executing, from implant all the way through to data loss. And there's an increased focus on hardening the host that the EDR software is installed on. So blocking USB access, changing registry keys, applying policies, for example. And then in more recent times, we really have what we can consider now the next gen AV, or the EDR generation. The focus being almost entirely on tactics, techniques, procedures, behavioral based detection with machine learning built into the machine and being performed in the cloud. And realistically, these days, signature-less detection is absolutely necessary to stop most of the threats that we're seeing. One of the things I'd like to draw your attention to is the green line across the bottom. What we can really see is that the amount of data and visibility that we're getting from endpoint devices using these tools is really increasing from essentially nothing to full event collection from a machine, analysis being performed in the cloud to understand what sorts of threats might be attacking a network.
Sorry, before we move on, George,
yeah,
I'd like to say it's very interesting from a business standpoint as well. So the antivirus market and the endpoint detection and response market have undergone a significant change since the kind of 2014, 2015 where it is on the slides, where it mentions it on the slides. So if you think, I remember back in like 2015, kind of there was a product called Cylance. Cylance was one of the first next generation antivirus solutions that came to market. It did things, it was quite interesting. I think it was okay for the time it came out, and it certainly changed, put on a wave of change with regards to the endpoint market. But then the market very quickly moved on, right? So you saw Carbon Black. Carbon Black is a tool that on the endpoint detection and response side, on the EDR side, basically, that most of the major security operations centers started using. And then you fast forward to today, and you're seeing a very consolidated market, a market where the likes of Cylance and Carbon Black are still here. People like CrowdStrike have come in, and people like Cyberease, and even Microsoft ATP with their Defender product are a very strong candidate that people should be considering when they're looking at the right endpoint technology to be leveraging. But the other thing to point out is that the market is changing. So Carbon Black was recently bought out by VMware. Cylance was bought out by BlackBerry. CrowdStrike have IPO'd for quite a significant amount of money with a very good valuation. Cyberease had 300 million pumped into them by SoftBank. And then even the traditional players like Symantec. Symantec are now brought out an EDR proposition, and they've been bought out by people like Broadsoft. So I guess all I wanted to point out is that as organizations are going out there considering what the right toolset for their organization needs to be, I think they ought to be treading very carefully, because this is a very dynamic space right now where a lot of acquisitions or mergers or changes are bound to happen and are already happening. So I completely agree with proceed, but proceed with care. And obviously people like companies like Ultima, who have a lot of experience in this sector, can advise and can leverage our capabilities to also advise further.
Yeah, there's certainly no lacking of investment in this space, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely a new frontier to start monitoring endpoints rather than more network-based ways of detection and response.
I think the other vendor to think of there is Microsoft. Who would have thought Microsoft would do what they're doing now? So it's,
Oh yeah, ATP. I mean, as I said, Microsoft ATP is certainly a very strong player right now as well. So between all of those companies, there are a number of considerations that businesses need to make, to have and take, and clearly, I can probably think of 3 or 4 major players today that are doing a good job. I don't know how they will be performing 24 to 36 months from now. As I said, it's a very dynamic space.
Who knows?
So in terms of the poll, I think it's time to reveal the poll. So the question was, do your remote users have EDR or next-gen AV on their work machines? The vast majority said, responded saying that they don't. I think over 60% said that they don't, and another set of people, about 40%, said that they are unsure as to whether or not they are using EDR. I think on the unsure side, George, I'd like your feedback too, and please feel free to also chip in, Chris. On the unsure side, there is a level of confusion because certain technologies integrate EDR features within their next generation AV capabilities. So they're bundling together. They might not be standalone, they might not be a fully fledged EDR tool, but certainly some capabilities are now making their way into their standard offer product set. So it would be interesting to have a conversation with your account managers at Ultima and understand that in a bit more detail. And certainly the second part of this presentation will explain what the merits of EDR are further and how you can optimize those capabilities. Any thoughts, or did I take them all?
No, I think that's quite interesting. Maybe there's some level of licensing that goes on with these sorts of things, and maybe the time hasn't been right for a move towards an EDR solution. I know quite commonly that they have a lot of AV vendors have maybe a long licensing period, and maybe people are coming towards the end of one of those now. I don't know. But it'd be very interesting to understand why people have chosen maybe not to go down the EDR route so far, and hopefully we can show them what the toolset can do.
I think you've definitely nailed one of the things we definitely get feedback from our customers is typically a lot of people see antivirus in traditional terms as like a commodity item. It's why do you guys run Kaspersky? Say, oh, it just ticks box, doesn't it? People don't seem to care about what product is. They see it very much as they're all the same and they don't really differentiate. And they are typically at least a 3-year agreement. We're seeing that quite commonly. So as you say, people who sort of renewed 2 to 3 years ago or thereabouts are kind of in the stage where at 3 years ago EDR wasn't very mature at all. I think we're also seeing quite a lot of fear around EDR. People think, oh, EDR is scary, it's expensive, it's complicated, I won't understand it, which is obviously why we know that one of the reasons we're working with you guys is to help alleviate that gap and have somebody who knows what they're doing with this, understand the output that these tools produce and make sure it's meaningful and related. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think all of those are very valid points as well. There's a bit of fear, there is obviously cost implications, but again, that as I said, because of the changes in the marketplace, those commercial challenges I think are coming down, are kind of being commoditized, and therefore simplified. The challenges are simplified, and then long-term commitments with an existing traditional antivirus vendor will make it difficult. Will make it difficult to justify the investment, and it will make it difficult to kind of see the lie of the land. But again, I urge organizations and the audience today to speak to Ultima and understand what their options are, because there are a number of options out there that can provide significant benefit to your organization right now.
Yeah, let's see if we can teach people how to leverage EDR if they decide to go down that route. And I'll go over some of the challenges and the advice that I would give for a new or even existing EDR user. So the challenges we have for detection, first of all, we're collecting huge amounts of data with an EDR platform. We're taking in very large amounts of event logs from a machine, and although the tool set itself will do a huge amount in making sense of that, we now have access to all of that data, and so we need to leverage that appropriately. As was being discussed before, maybe you're understanding that your existing tool set investment may not be getting the telemetry that you require to adequately defend your estate. Maybe the other security tool sets you have may be overlapping somewhat with some of the features of EDR, but doesn't cover all of the the same things that an EDR platform might do. We also know that malware threats have become far more evasive and clandestine in the way that they operate. And this is just the nature of the arms race between defenders and attackers. They've simply had to become more evasive and clandestine to avoid the more advanced security tooling that we have now. But at the same time, the threat actors know exactly as much as we do about the capabilities of the tool sets that we're deploying. They know what events are collected, and they will do their absolute utmost to avoid detection by these technologies, and they will try to disable them, even in some cases. So what sort of advice can I give? Well, firstly, we need to use the data and visibility that we've got in a logical way. So with an EDR solution across your endpoints, you essentially have a God's eye view of what your estate is up to at any moment in time. And we need to use all of that data in a logical way. And one of the ways that I like to make sense of this is to use a toolset called Jupyter Notebooks, an open source Pythonic data analysis platform. It sounds scary, but I promise you it's not. And most endpoint detection and response frameworks have an API interface that we can simply go and grab data with using these tool sets. Those API endpoints can be used to report on non-standard programs, potentially unwanted programs such as adware, things like that, or even use the huge amount of data that we're collecting to see if our users are performing shadow IT. Maybe they feel that a cracked version of a piece of software is better than the one that is being provided to them by the organization. So you can also get business intelligence out of these platforms. If you're paying that much money for it, you might as well leverage it to get as much information from your estate as you possibly can. One of the things that EDR solutions are really good for is using for grouping. So blocking USB access to, say, a factory estate or point of sale systems immediately reduces a huge amount of risk from your environment. You can decide that certain machines don't need USB access. There's absolutely no reason for them to have that sort of access, and so you can revoke the access from those machines. If a USB is plugged in, it will not be mounted, and thus malware cannot spread from that vector. And to use the tool efficiently, it's certainly, I'm not going to pretend that it's a plug and play solution. There is certainly some tuning and some thought that has to go into these sorts of platforms. And very close to my heart, threat intelligence feeds and watch lists are one way to certainly leverage all of the information that you're getting into this platform. There's many open source vendors of threat intelligence, and many of these platforms will have those threat intelligence feeds built in right out of the box. Can use these to keep ahead of the most active threats, the more recent campaigns for spam and malware, and ban specific hashes from running in your environment. So essentially a block listing, a list of known bad hashes or types of software you don't want to run in your environment. You can also use response playbooks in the same way that we use the Jupyter Notebooks to perform lookups for non-standard programs. We can use the exact same thing to isolate machines, remove software, kill processes, all completely remotely. So this allows, especially now in the current climate, we've performed full remote investigations on a machine, full remote isolations, removing malware, killing processes completely remotely, didn't even touch the device. In some cases, we haven't even been in the same country. So those sorts of tool sets are extremely powerful, especially as people are working more from home. And finally, once you get more mature in your EDR environment, and again, most EDR platforms will already leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework, but understanding how the MITRE ATT&CK framework fits into your environment would allow you to understand where gaps are in your visibility and your detection capabilities. And thus you can create rules to specifically plug those types of gaps in your environment. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is extremely powerful, very useful, and that is something that I definitely recommend if you are planning to roll out an EDR solution, or you already do, to seriously consider looking at.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, George. What I want to do is maybe spend another 5 minutes now on taking our audience through Redscan's capabilities, and certainly how we leverage Ultima as well in our proposition to deliver these sorts of services, those sorts of technologies as a service. So for organizations that are not certainly able or don't have the resources to do this in-house, Ultima and Redscan deliver this as a service through our Threat Detect Managed Detection Response service. So Threat Detect is our flagship brand name that is powered by our 24/7 security operations center. Everything we do, everything we drive is UK based, but obviously delivering to a global audience and a global set of clients. And we have worked very closely with Ultima over the past few months to build specific propositions that tie in very well with Ultima's portfolio and Ultima's capabilities. So in this one slide, I'll just try and capture how Redscan delivers these things. So what I'll do is from the very left, the first component of this is that what we are seeing is a number of different types of client environments, right? So customers of ours and prospects that we're talking to and organizations that we are advising with Ultima are leveraging the cloud more and more. Ultima have a very strong knowledge and understanding of cloud services, both with obviously being a very big Azure partner, but obviously AWS as well. And a number of different applications sitting both in cloud and on-premise in data centers. At the same time, we spoke about the situation currently. People are working from home, threats are moving to the endpoints, and obviously you still have your kind of traditional data center or office-based network that still holds possibly quite a lot of key assets for your company. So the client environment is changing, right? And it will be evolving further, I believe, with this kind of new normal that people keep referring to. So what Redscan have built is a layer of detection which enables us to select different tools, different capabilities that align best to each client environment. And that is paramount right now. Okay, unfortunately, long gone are the days where you could just trust a single product, either whether that's an EDR tool or a SIEM, a traditional SIEM product, to monitor a whole environment. What we took the view of what we felt was that the right way to do this is to assess the client environment and leverage different technologies that fit best each specific client. And we have taken a very vendor agnostic approach on that, in that we can leverage multiple EDR toolsets, some of which have been mentioned today, and multiple SIEM and behavior analytics toolsets as well. But what we do is we augment those toolsets by building our own bespoke watch lists in there. In other words, and some of you who have worked with products like SIEM in the past might be familiar with this, the out-of-the-box ruling in some of these toolsets is not necessarily fit for purpose. It generates a lot of false positives. It creates a lot of noise that typically just reduces the efficacy of the tool over time. So what Redscan has been doing for a long period of time now is building our own bespoke watch lists that are highly targeted and highly effective. And the way we deliver those is through our offensive team. So Redscan is a Quest accredited penetration testing and red teaming organization as well. And we allow our offensive team access straight into the tooling to build bespoke watch lists, because the idea being, who's better equipped to understand the way the bad guys think than people like us. And we deliver those through cloud, in a cloud way, on premise, or in a hybrid manner. Obviously, in today's webinar, we want to focus on the EDR component, otherwise we'd be here forever. So what Redscan does is it takes that endpoint detection response capability and moves it into our security operations center and into a platform that we have built called CyberOps. So CyberOps is our threat management platform. It is a single pane of glass that our security operations center looks at on a consistent basis, on a 24/7 basis, sorry. And what it enables us to do is, as the alerts and the detections come in from the EDR toolset, we are able to enrich that data with some of the things that George mentioned earlier, with threat intelligence, making Jupyter playbooks, but also with additional information from other clients that we have also got in our security operations center. In other words, if we've seen something happen to one client, we can very quickly leverage that knowledge and protect you or other clients as well. So that enrichment and analytics is vital in reducing the time it takes to detect an attack. So that as a SOC analyst looks at at an incident or an alert raised by the detection toolset, they can very quickly assess whether or not it's a real attack or a false positive, okay? And carry out quick investigations and effective investigation. Once that's done, the second layer of capability that we bring into the equation is that we can orchestrate and respond to activities a lot faster. So as we know that things are real and it's a real attack, we have built playbooks and orchestration that allows us to automatically contain an attack from spreading. So we can isolate a host of the rest of the network on EDR, right? So we see an attack on one specific endpoint, we can very quickly isolate that endpoint from the rest of the network, or we can kill a process or delete a payload. And we can either do that automatically or semi-automatically. So an analyst can look at it, investigate it, and once they feel that this is a real incident, if they have been given approval by our client, we can take that action on your behalf on a 24/7 basis. And that's critical because many of these types of attacks, as you saw in the beginning, some of you click on a ransomware link like the one that George showed you in the beginning. These sorts of attacks can have a significant impact very quickly, and if they are there to possibly be more advanced and gradually gain access into the rest of the network, again, our toolsets are able to deliver them and contain them, isolate them, make sure we wipe it clean and contain the attack from spreading. Some of the good work we're doing with Ultima is that because of CyberOps, we are also able to build workflow with Ultima to make sure that through their operation centers, we work as one. So our SOC and Ultima's capabilities and NOC are working together in conjunction through workflow, and we can also deliver workflow with other third parties that our clients might have. So as you use other third-party organizations for different parts of your estate, we can automatically raise alerts and incidents straight into their operation rather than wake you up and get you out of bed. So if as Ultima manage large parts of your estate, we can handle these incidents directly with Ultima and just obviously let you know and inform you of what we've done at the back of it. Everything underpinned by our next generation security operations center. We are currently obviously in a DR position, so everyone's working from home because of COVID-19. We have been working from home for a long period of time, but without an issue at all. All our clients are exceptionally happy still, luckily. But we obviously also have a security operations center that we will eventually return into in Nottingham in the UK, and we're building a second SOC also in London that was due to be live by June, but obviously won't be live by June considering we're all working from home. So we'll probably have to have it live by the tail end of 2020. All our SOC is fully ISO accredited and Quest SOC accredited as well. And we were due to be SC cleared by the end of Q2. I probably need to update this slide. And again, the Home Office, because of everything that is happening with COVID, we have asked to extend that out to the end of Q3 if possible. But in the SOC, you get a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of understanding of these threats. We've seen these threats before, and you get that kind of proactive threat hunting and investigation that we can carry out on clients' behalf and notify them of anything that goes wrong. But really, as with every endpoint detection and response service and a managed detection and response service, the reason organizations buy these capabilities in rather than build them themselves is because we need to make sure we focus on the outcomes. And that's what I wanted to make sure that this triggers through in this conversation. So really the two key areas are, we need to reduce the time it takes to respond to threats, okay, by making sure we focus on real incidents. We don't get you out of bed for the wrong things. We are able to quickly respond by containing attacks from spreading through automated and manual response actions. We map everything to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Again, we're an offensive business. We know how the bad guys operate, and we leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework more and more. And that gives us a lot of coverage and a lot of ongoing coverage as we improve our custom watch lists. And we provide remediation guidance and support. On the flip side, you clearly need to be justifying these investments. So from an assurance perspective, being able to go back to your business and assure them that your business is in a better place than what it was before these tools were invested in, before these services were onboarded. Your board will come to you and ask you, how am I doing? Am I secure? I'm in a COVID-19 situation. Am I secure? We are providing the right levels of assurances through reporting and scenario-based testing and further continuous improvement capabilities, so that you can sit back and tell your board that you are doing much more than you were doing before these tools were invested. And that, I can probably go on for hours, and so can George. This is a topic very, very near and dear to our hearts. But I think we're probably teetering on exceeding our time limit. So I don't know if there are any questions that have been raised, Chris. But yeah, I think
we've got a couple of questions coming, so I'll let you finish off first.
Great. So just the final slide then from George's standpoint, and then we'll take over the questions.
Yeah, I'd just like to recap on what we've discussed today. These are the key takeaways that I want you to take away from the session. Consider the threats to your remote workers and take them extremely seriously. These threats are happening, and in greater numbers than earlier in the year. Think about the potential risk of these dormant threats returning to your office environment as your remote workers return to the office. Understand that EDR is a powerful tool, extremely powerful, but it's not a silver bullet. It requires a significant amount of thought into the deployment and upkeep of the product. But if you do those things in the right way, it can completely change the way that your security risk profile looks. And using some of the advice and guidance, think about how you can get the maximum benefit of the EDR technology for your environment. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. And yeah, I think we should go to some questions and answers.
Okay, thanks guys, much appreciated. So a couple of questions come in. One about the use of EDR on sort of smartphones, mobile tablets, that kind of thing. Is that something that we should be looking to adopt, or is it just focused on sort of laptops and desktops and servers, I guess?
Yep, that's a really good question. So long answer short, there are EDR solutions that can run on mobile phones. Personally, I would certainly consider running it on VIPs in your business. I don't think necessarily that needs to be on every single corporate phone at the moment, but certainly threats against VIPs and their mobile telephony is certainly something to consider. Yes.
Great. Sounds good. Second one, is there any requirement to use technology such as EDR on test or development environments, or are we keeping this just for sort of production?
Yeah, I really would consider using EDR in a test environment, just as you would in prod. These tools can allow you to get a lot of diagnostic information from those environments, and indeed securing those environments is extremely important. Usually there's a lot of keys floating around and credentials floating around in those sorts of environments. So making sure that they're constantly secure, I think, is very important.
makes sense that people quite often have just the same data on there, particularly their test environment as they do for dev. But so yeah, it kind of makes sense to me. So
yeah,
great. And then
focus has been on. I think today's focus has certainly been on home networks, right, and home work and therefore workstations. But we at Redscan leverage EDR all the time on servers, right, on your VMware, on your Linux and your Windows server estate. So we can take the same type of actions that we discussed earlier in your for your server estate, so or your Citrix estate. So it is very much an area of focus that can provide a lot of visibility for your organization, whether you do it in-house or whether you work with us to do it.
Sounds good. And then the last question is around sort of understanding and what Jupyter and MITRE ATT&CK sort of means. Is it easy? Is it something we can pick up? I know you kind of briefly hit on this earlier, George. Yeah, don't be scared by it, but it's, I guess some people don't understand it or kind of feel it's an area of confusion. So
yeah. So yeah, it's certainly not entry level. It's essentially just a Python framework. So if you've got a little bit of coding knowledge, I think you'd pick this up very quickly. There's an awful lot of guides and pre-built Jupyter playbooks for a lot of EDR platforms already out there. Again, open source, just as Jupyter notebooks are, completely free to use. So I think that there's a wealth of resources out there for understanding and using Jupyter playbooks. And similarly with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, it's a really well documented framework. The website for MITRE ATT&CK is phenomenal, and indeed there's an absolute wealth of people doing talks just around MITRE ATT&CK frameworks on YouTube. So yeah, there's a lot of places to learn about those things, and doing so is a very, very good way of properly leveraging the EDR investment that you're considering making.
That makes sense. Many of the vendors we're seeing their messaging is in sort of how they align to these, because obviously it's kind of an industry standard, and it's just nothing bespoke to that individual company or things like that. So it's a good sort of generic message. So. Great, that's all the questions. So yeah, thanks again to George and Constantine for presenting, and thanks everyone else for joining us this morning. Hope it's found it useful. And as Constantine mentioned, any questions, please feel free to reach out. We will share these slides with everybody after this is finished, so you better review those at your leisure. And hope you have a good rest of your day.
Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.